know why we're here, right? So if you come up with any questions, please write them down as we go, and that way I can try to get through as many, because a lot of times people have similar questions, and we can ask them and get to as many as possible at the end. So that's one of our goals. Okay, so today we have our Douglas County District Attorney candidates, and I'm going to briefly introduce them, and we are going to get to questions. Some questions will be for both candidates, and some questions will be specific to an individual, so I'll try to make that clear. And we, of course, want our candidates to be as specific as possible, right? Because we know you've done other forums, and we're getting close to early voting, right? So October 16th is when early voting in the county begins, and I know some of you will take advantage of that. So the election is closer sometimes than it seems. All right, so our first candidate is Dakota Loomis, Democrat for District Attorney. And some things that I want to use to introduce, there's lots of things we could say, and they're going to both say things about themselves. But if we want to talk about a way to introduce them, I want to focus on their issues and priorities that they list on their website. So Dakota lists on his website that his issues for this election are to rebuild relationships with community partners, expand second chances for those who deserve it, and retain and train professional prosecutors. Our next candidate is the Republican candidate for Douglas County District Attorney, Mike Warner, and on his website he calls them priorities. And he says that his priorities in running for office are relationships with law enforcement, communication with victims, communication with district court judges, hiring experienced prosecutors, improving jury trials, impartiality, support for special courts like juvenile justice, and victim witness unit. So those are some of the things that they both talk about on their websites. And I recommend you visit both their websites. It's loomis4da.com, so loomis4da.com, and mikewarner4forda.com, and mikewarner4forda.com. So I recommend you look up both of those. Okay, so our first question is going to deal with background and experience. So I'm going to target these a little bit to each one of you. So Mike, let me do yours first. So Mike, your campaign website lists numerous positions you've held in the U.S. Attorney's offices, district attorney's offices, including prosecuting a wide variety of felony jury trials. So my question to you is, why is this experience important for the Douglas County District Attorney?
Well, thank you, and thank you to the League for having us here tonight. I think it's widely recognized that the incumbent DA's office has been troubled and has, to a large extent, exhibited a great deal of damage. That was certainly indicated by the Democratic primary that we had in August. I think both Mr. Loomis and I agree that change is needed. And the people that voted for Ms. Valdez agree that change is needed. What kind of change do we need? What kind of person do you want to be the next DA? What I bring to the DA position is a tremendous amount of experience. I have 30 years of experience as a prosecuting attorney, both at the state level and at the federal level. A great deal of experience with jury trials and crimes of all types. I've dealt with every police agency that exists at the state and federal level. I'm not very good at bragging about myself or telling people how great I am or all of that. I just have a lot of experience, and I've hacked it out for many years. That's how you become a career prosecutor. You work day in and day out. Just like a doctor or a mechanic or a teacher, you just do it over and over and over again. And what this office needs is experience. It needs somebody to come in and fix it, because it's going to have to be rebuilt from the ground up. And what that office needs is a leader that has done it before and that can come in and communicate with law enforcement, with the judges, be sensitive to victims' rights, and give them direction. Someone without experience cannot do that. It's not a job that you can learn on the fly. That's what we've seen for the last 4 years. My campaign is based on experience matters. And my sole sole reason for running. I don't have a political ideology. I don't have any extremist views. I would, welcome questions about my political values, because I'm running as a Republican in what's called a blue county. And I want you to be very clear about why I'm doing that. And maybe I'll get an opportunity to explain that. But I don't have any vision of politics in the office. I'm not supported by the Republican Party, either at the state level or national level. I don't get any money from them. I'm still waiting for a $50,000 check from the Koch brothers. It hasn't come yet. Every day I check the mail, I'm basically just coming up and out into politics because of how disastrous the office was. And it was hard for me to sit on the sidelines this year and see other candidates without experience being elected in a primary without the entire county having the ability to vote. And that's why I'm
Okay, Dakota, piggybacking off of that. So your campaign website says you've worked for the Kansas Attorney General, the Shawnee County District Attorney, and as the Baldwin City Attorney. So how do these positions prepare you for the primary criminal prosecutor, to be the primary criminal prosecutor in Douglas County? And what specific experience do you have with misdemeanor and felony prosecutions?
Thanks, Ty, and again, thanks to the women for Kansas for hosting this event. So my experience on the prosecution side, as you just listed, I've been in the state level, the district level, and then here most recently in Baldwin City as the Baldwin City Attorney, where I handle prosecution and all of the city attorney matters for Baldwin City. So I have been able to, from the start of my career when I started at the, when I was still in law school, started at the Kansas Attorney General's office, learned under folks who had great deal of experience. Then I got to go to the Shawnee County Attorney's office and met my wife there, who's a victim witness specialist, learned from her regarding how best to handle and treat survivors of crime. Got to work under a number of people there who taught me both, I think, maybe the best ways to practice and some of the worst ways to practice, as we've seen from that office over the years. I took away from my experience there a deep respect for the job that the prosecutor does, but also the importance of having someone in the position of district attorney and leading that office who has the shares the same morals, same values that I do when it comes to treating survivors of crimes, treating the people who are charged with crimes, the courts, you name the group that we're dealing with, law enforcement, and that taught me that at all times in this process, I want to make sure I'm treating everyone I deal with dignity and respect. I saw far too little of that in many prosecution offices, both as a prosecutor in Shawnee County and then as a defense attorney across the state here in Douglas County. And I think the system works best when we can trust the system. And trust the system means treating people with dignity and respect, making sure their voice is heard, and making them believe the process has included them in a fair way. And then as a Baldwin City prosecutor, I've had a really great experience there to not just prosecute cases, but work with local law enforcement agencies. I work almost daily with the Baldwin City Police Department. I work in conjunction with the Lawrence Police Department, Sheriff's Office, Eudora, and KU on issues that we all are facing across this county right now. So I've been able to develop strong relationships with all the law enforcement partners we have here in the community. And I've also been able to practice both as a defense attorney, where I have the vast majority of my experience, and as a prosecutor in Baldwin City, and be able to bring those two worlds together so I have a better understanding of what good cases look like, what bad cases look like, how to manage cases, and also how to treat opposing counsel with respect. My experience is not on the prosecution side, my experience is on the defense side. I've been a defense attorney here for the past 10 years, handled roughly 500 felony cases here in Douglas County, another 300-400 misdemeanor cases, both in county and then other municipalities. And so my experience is almost solely as a defense attorney. And so here in Douglas County, I spent the last 10 years building relationships with our community service providers, building relationships with our judges. I can walk in and talk with any of our judges at any time. We have respectful, open communication. And I think our judges, to a person, would tell you that their hope is that that continues throughout whoever is elected in this general election, that open communication, honest communication continues. And that's been sorely lacking over the last 4 years. And so, my experience, as I said, the last 10 years, spending almost every day in court, going to trial, jury trials, bench trials, from misdemeanor PFAs all the way up to off-grid just law cases, attempted capital murder cases, first-degree murder cases, all those jury trials. So I have a range of experience here locally. I've learned throughout being a prosecutor and a defense attorney how best to treat the folks you deal with day in, day out. And that's one of the main reasons I'm running for this office is, as my opponent said, this office needs to be restored to the place where the community can trust that it's doing its job as intended to do. We can't do that unless it's restored with professionalism and treating everyone who comes into contact with the office with respect and dignity. And that's why I'm running.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to switch a little bit to something that Mike kind of referenced, which is political motivations and the role of politics in your office. So Dakota, I'm going to start with you. You mentioned several things related to this. On your campaign website, under Why I'm Running, you say, and just like you did just there, I'm running to restore the community relationships that are the backbone of our criminal justice system and return professionalism and integrity to the district attorney's office. Now, in 2014, this was the year Women for Kansas was formed. We were formed that year, as Kelly said earlier, to elect moderates to office and specifically to unseat Brownback in his re-election, which of course was a failure, as you may remember. So, in 2014, many Kansans, and especially Women for Kansas, because this was our big moment, remember when you undermined community relationships, and some argue the Paul Davis governor campaign, when you mocked 3 Southeast Kansas towns as the most crap-hole small towns in the state. And you were fired from your position as the Democratic Party's communications director thereafter. So based on that, why should people believe you have the professionalism and integrity to restore relationships in the DA's office in 2024?
I think I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's a really good question, and I think it speaks to what's happened in my life since that point in 2014. I certainly take full, total responsibility and ownership for making a silly comment on the forum. I took responsibility at the time, and it really led me back to the criminal law and working in criminal law. After I left, after leaving the office at KDP in 2014, I opened up my own practice here in Douglas County, and since then, have been working day in, day out to treat the people I'm working with as if each of their cases is the most important thing in my life, and to treat them with respect, to make sure that it's not happening ever again. But it was a really painful, but I think important lesson for me to learn was that no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, if you're not talking to anyone directly, words matter, and that had an impact on people. And I spent the last 10 years making sure that would never happen again, but also making sure that if you go into the courthouse and talk with anyone I work with, talk with judges, talk with opposing counsel, talk with my clients, they tell you that they've never had any instance where I've behaved with them inappropriately, done anything that would be untoward. And so it really got me back into, I think, a much better place in terms of what I was doing, my practice was doing in terms of career. I think I spent the last 10 years trying to make sure that never happened again. And I think it's really important to know that because of that, I understand, I think, exactly why that treating people with respect to dignity really does matter. Because at each turn, even a throwaway comment could undermine someone's faith in the system that we're operating, could undermine the faith in you as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney. And so to be mindful at all times of how your words, how your actions can impact others, I think is an incredibly important lesson I learned based upon that. And so I take that with me every single day. I certainly have there's no one else to blame for that but me. Take full responsibility for that. But that's also part, I think, of being transparent and open and honest about this, is that is something that I've learned from, I've grown from, and I think I take with me every single day when I deal with other people, be it the court, prosecutors, my clients, or witnesses.
Thank you. All right, Mike, on your campaign website's homepage, and you referenced this also a minute ago, the first thing it says on your homepage is no politics. I'm running for the position of county district attorney, and I'm not motivated by political considerations, which you've shared with us today too. On last week, on your campaign's Facebook page, in a long post, you discussed numerous things related to your opponent, the primary election, the Democratic Party, and its candidates in numerous counties. And then you also wrote the following near the end. Citizens are fed up with high property taxes, inflated property valuations, and taxes eating into their incomes, with the money going somewhere other than into their bank accounts. The DA's office does not craft tax policy, and in fact, it is a taxpayer-funded office. So why is tax policy relevant to your candidacy, and if elected, your role as the Douglas County District Attorney?
There are a couple of issues and questions that you raised. First of all, if you were to look at the Douglas County Commission budget, one of the biggest items in that budget is the Douglas County District Attorney's Office. An ineffective, inefficient Douglas County District Attorney's Office costs you money. When there's a disciplinary complaint, who do you think paid for it? When there's massive turnover of ADAs in the office because the DA doesn't know what she's doing because she's flat out inexperienced, who do you think pays for that? Those are economic costs associated with ineffective public service. And yeah, there is a collateral damage associated with that affects taxpayers, and we all know that. So there's a fiduciary element connected to being a district attorney. And so if you run an efficient office, not only do you help maximize public safety and reorient the office towards victims' rights, not defendants' rights all the time, but victims' rights, you save the county money, okay? And that's what's obviously needed in that office. Now, this was sort of a conglomerate question here, but regarding politics, there hasn't been a two-party, two-candidate election for DA in Douglas County in 20 years. If you're not a registered Democrat, you may not have ever voted in your entire life for a DA here in Douglas County. One party, the Democrats, have controlled the office. And Ms. Valdez was elected in August of 2020 with 7,500 votes. And, you know, how many people voted in a primary? Well, hardly any, but then even less than that if you're talking about a single party. If I had not run, Mr. Loomis, who has never prosecuted a felony case, would be the DA, okay? So why am I running? Am I running because I have, you know, am I a Manchurian candidate and I have some sort of extremist agenda that's tied to national politics? No way. And I've taken pains to demonstrate that on my website and in some of the Facebook postings that Dr. Edwards has indicated. I'm running to offer the county a complete vote. That is, every county citizen can now vote for DA. And that hasn't happened for a long time. I'm giving voters a choice. I'm giving voters the opportunity to pick an experienced prosecutor who will come in, fix the office, give direction. I'm not going to say kick butt because that sounds bad, but I think there is probably a need for some discipline in that office. I have fought prosecutorial abuses in the past, and my website points that out. It's under something called prosecutorial integrity. I will not stand for any prosecutorial misconduct, nor will I stand for any type of disrespect from my prosecutors towards the judges, towards the victims, towards public people, towards the courts. That is something that I find personally intolerable. And I will say this, I've also been a defense attorney. I've been a defense attorney in Douglas County. I was a defense attorney earlier in my career and a defense attorney later in my career. It's difficult soul grinding work, and Mr. Loomis is to be applauded for doing that work. I found it to be excruciating. I handled off-grid cases, murder cases, sex cases. And the system is such, it's a funny thing, you go in the courthouse and the district attorney's office is indoors. It's in the courthouse. The defense attorneys come from the outside. They are outsiders. They are not insiders. And district attorneys and ADAs interact with the courts all day. They're insiders. And I know what that's like. And I know what it's like to email prosecutors and have them ignore me, or me wanting to get discovery and being blown off, or me wanting to negotiate a case and not having them respond to me. And this is after having been a prosecutor, and it's infuriating. My office is not going to be like that. And defense attorneys, they might be mad because if I'm elected, a fellow defense attorney was not, but they could get a whole lot worse than me. And I'm going to be very sympathetic to the defense side and make sure my office is as well. But in terms of having any type of political agenda, when I decided to, and I'll shut up soon. When I decided to run, and it was the middle of May, I didn't want to run, okay? The last thing in the world I wanted to do was run in an election, but I was encouraged to run. Both of us claimed that law enforcement encouraged us to run, and we joked between each other, maybe law enforcement encouraged every attorney to run because things were so bad. But in any event, I didn't want to sit on the sidelines, so I ran. How do I run? It's a public record. I was an independent. That's how I was registered, okay? Was I going to run as a fourth Democrat and really mess things up? No. So I decided you can't run as an independent unless you have an army of folks to go out and get, signatures of registered voters, which I didn't have. So I said, I'm going to run as a Republican. People said, oh no, you can't do that. That's suicide. No one will vote for you. No one's run as a Republican. I took a chance. I figured folks might not be so reflexive and not so knee-jerk and get over their cognitive biases and maybe look at me and look at my background and hear me out and make a decision based on who I really am. Have I been targeted by folks that think I'm a radical extremist? Oh, you bet. On Facebook and going door to door. And it's very tough being prejudged because of a little letter by your name. But in terms of the values and the mission statements that Ms. Wall indicated, yes, I'm moderate. I'm very moderate. And if there's anything I can show to this county by running, it's that one, I'm offering myself as an experienced candidate. Here's my background, take it or leave it. I can help fix this mess. And number two, I want to show that there could be a legitimate two-party election in this county and not have the opposing party be presumed to be some sort of radical kook, because I'm definitely not. All right.
Thank you. All right, so this next question is for both of you. So Dakota, we're going to start with you. So concerning the current DA's office, many, and you both referred to this, many in Douglas County have been dismayed at the number of repeated failed prosecutions, including in high-profile murder and rape cases. How will you ensure successful prosecutions while balancing victim and the accused rights?
So I think right now we're all aware of what's been going on in the district attorney's office, the cases that have been making splashes in the headlines and newspaper. First and foremost, it starts with your relationship with law enforcement even before a case comes to your office. The process, as is right now, law enforcement and the district attorney's office have been at odds for almost 4 years. That's an untenable situation to be in if you're going to protect the community safety and work viable cases. So step one is restoring those relationships between the sheriff's department and the DA's office, the police department and the DA's office, so that before a case even lands in the district attorney's lab, the affidavit comes in saying this is what we think happened, please charge this. You've worked with the law enforcement agencies to better train them to make sure that if it's a domestic violence case involving strangulation, that they've done the proper checklist, they've gone through all the things they need to make sure they've done to collect the proper evidence so you can charge that case appropriately. If it's domestic, they've gone through lethality assessments, which thankfully we're now doing. That law enforcement is trained to know what the attorney's office needs from them when the case gets presented. It also means that you have a relationship where if a case gets presented and you need to go back and get more from that law enforcement agency, you can make requests to them that they do additional investigation. They can on their own decide to do that or not, but you can work with them to make sure that that case is put together before it's even filed in the best possible manner. It also means having better discretion and better judgment when you're filing cases. So once you have the appropriate investigation done, you've worked with your law enforcement partners to make sure you have everything you need to have prosecutors in that office who can look at that evidence, look at the affidavit, look at all the evidence that comes along with that, and make sure that they have everything they need to charge crimes appropriately. Far too often what we see is overcharging. We're charging where it's stretched beyond what can be proven beyond reasonable doubt. Far too often we see charging that will get you past a preliminary hearing, but as anyone involved in the criminal justice system knows, that's not the standard that you really need to be looking at when you're charging cases. It's, can you prove it beyond reasonable doubt? Are you pretty close to sure that you can prove it beyond reasonable doubt? Otherwise, there's far too much leeway there that you're giving before you file charges. Because getting things past preliminary hearing is relatively easy. So you need experienced prosecutors in those roles reviewing those cases with good discretion, good judgment, who know what they're looking for. You also then need to have prosecutors who can try those cases. You need folks who are experienced not just as prosecutors, but experienced with the court system that here in Douglas County know their juries, know their judges, can stay in their office for more than 1, 2, or 3 years, is what we're seeing right now over and over again. It's this revolving door. So you need to stop that revolving door of prosecutors and keep them in the office so they can gain experience with how judges rule on issues. They can gain experience with how Douglas County juries react to certain arguments. And so building those blocks, better relationship with law enforcement up front to better work cases, better judgment when you are filing the cases up front, and then experienced prosecutors who have been in Douglas County for a good period of time who can then take those cases to trial should they need to, I think is the backbone of a strong prosecution office. It also means, though, that you need folks who are willing to stay here, willing to work here, and we've talked about this, I think in the last forum we talked about this, both Mr. Warner and I noted that this is not a short-term fix, overnight fix. This is going to take a lot of work and a lot of digging. And so you need people who are willing to stay the course for the next 4, 5, 10 years on this, because it's such a big hole to dig out of right now between the community partners, relationships that need to be rebuilt, the relationships with law enforcement that need to be reestablished, with judges, with community corrections, you name the group, they need to be reestablished, and then to get that office stabilized with career prosecutors, folks who know what they're doing, and folks who are committed to staying here in Douglas County and continuing to work here over the next 10 years.
Mike?
Most of what you see in the district attorney's office in terms of dysfunction and what Mr. Loomis just described is the result almost completely of prosecutorial inexperience. Ms. Valdez, I'm sure, entered office with good intentions. She was trying to make the jump from academia to a prosecutor's office. She was trying to be a kind of progressive prosecutor and failed miserably. It's unfortunate, but it definitely happened, and the folks that elected her apparently agreed. Mr. Loomis has not been a prosecutor before, not a felony prosecutor. He has some collateral experience, but he comes from the defense side. He looks at things from the defense side. He would have to hire prosecutors. I am the prosecutor. I would be the prosecutor. And I've worked in many prosecution offices, some of them heavily politicized, particularly at the federal level, where a lot of appointments into those offices are based on political connections and political patronage. And then those folks who've never tried a case come in and they hire their friends and their family, and sometimes make them supervisors. It even gets worse than that. So you're sort of caught up in a professional, quote, political environment. I don't want that type of office. And I know as a career prosecutor, you want a prosecutor to come in that office. You'll respect someone who's done it before, particularly a troubled office that's directionless like this one, and probably has a bunch of young kids that don't know what they're doing. I'm the old hand that can come in and fix that and give them direction. And I can attract experienced prosecutors if I have the ability to hire them to come there. And experienced prosecutors want to work for a prosecutor. They don't want to work for an office manager. They don't want to work for an administrative DA. And this is a pretty dire situation. And I'm just suggesting hire me, and I will fix that mess. Because what you're seeing and what you don't know, or you see it in the paper, but yes, relationships with law enforcement are totally broken down in that office. Relationships with judges are totally broken down. They run roughshod over victims' rights. They don't know what they're doing. Cases are submitted, they don't file them, or as Mr. Loomis pointed out, they misfile them, overcharge them. They don't know what they're doing. And so prosecutorial experience in those situations is extremely necessary. And having the ability to evaluate cases and interact with the police, which I've done for 30 years with every level of police, I was known as a pain in the you-know-what with some police. I would say, no, we've got a big hole there, you go fix it. They would say, no, I'm not going to do that. I think it's fine. You're a scaredy cat. No, you got a big hole there. You go fix it. Well, I said, well, then take your case to some other prosecutor. Well, they couldn't. I made sure holes were filled. And, you know, as a prosecutor, I don't know how many trials I had, but a lot. I lost 2. Okay? And I deserved to lose both of them. But when I went to trial, I made sure holes were filled. And you can see just by reading the paper that that doesn't happen. That's why you need an experienced prosecutor, folks.
Thank you. All right, so this is personal, and Mike, you've kind of addressed this, so I'm going to give you one more chance to do it. So I've spoken with voters in Douglas County in preparation for this event today, and many find your experience appealing. However, I've heard several different versions of this idea. I don't want to fall for a Republican who behaves like a moderate in a campaign, but shares the agenda of Chris Kobach and will work to support such an agenda in our DA's office. So I know you've addressed this a little bit, but do you have anything else to add to that?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I don't want to fall for a Republican who behaves like a moderate in a campaign, but shares the agenda of Chris Kobach and will work to support such an agenda in our DA's office.
Now, who is Chris Kobach?
The Attorney General, who also lives in Douglas County.
Oh.
Cute. Sort of.
I don't know Chris Kobach. Okay. He has not driven his Jeep down to see me.
He does know who he is.
And I guess it's, you know, I suppose Republicans say, well, he's a rhino. What are my Republican values? I'll tell you what they are. They're not the extremist Republican values that we see now. Nor is the Democratic Party the party that wants to decriminalize the border or defund the police, or is proud of Hunter Biden's 2 felony convictions or Bob Mendez's felony conviction. Project 2025, I would be the first one fired if that were in effect. The Republican values that I embrace in my role are probably those of the old-time moderate Republicans. John McCain telling some woman in the audience that no, Obama is not a Muslim terrorist. finding Sandra Day O'Connor. It's the first George Bush, passing the Americans with Disabilities Act. Even George Bush II, the son, talked about compassionate conservatism. Things that Bob Dole, our cherished senator for many years, was a bipartisan politician. And I would like to see that come back. We don't have much of a Republican Party in Douglas County, and it's been an educational experience for me, having not been involved in politics, interacting with people on both sides. And I found the local Republican Party, believe it or not, to be quite moderate. We've got county commissioner candidates that have nothing in common with the national culture, war scenes, and all of that. All they're worried about is trying to help everyone with property taxes. I want to improve public safety and make the district attorney's office functional again. I don't want to get caught up in goofy politics. But when you run with an R, you're subject to that, and I have been. I've been prejudged quite a bit. And going door to door, it's kind of scary. When somebody comes out and starts screaming at me. And that's happened, but it's 95 degrees too. So my political values are not related to the current extremist Republican Party. And what we really are at the local level, what I am anyway, is I'm offering a pragmatic solution to a local problem. I'm not running for national office. I have no desire to inculcate the DA's office with whatever Chris Kovac stands for. And actually, if you got to know me, and if you read my website, looked at some of the things I've written on there, some of my Facebook posts, you would not be disappointed politically, no matter who you are, what affiliation you are, if I'm elected.
All right, Dakota. So voters in the county in 2020 wanted change, which we've talked about today, and we wanted someone new in the DA's office. However, the primary demonstrated that voters are fed up again and still want change. Many people have said to me they don't want to repeat the problems of an inexperienced prosecutor in the office, and Mike has more experience than you as a prosecutor. Why should we trust you to remedy the current failures in this office and chart a productive path forward?
The first reason I think you should trust me to chart a better path forward for this office is because as a lifelong Douglas County resident, someone raising a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old in this community, I am firmly committed to sticking out any and all bad storms, any and all messes that we have in the DA's office, to restore it to a place that protects our community, protects our kids, make sure that people who are harming others are held accountable, and that we have a justice system that's working for everyone, that holds the folks who harm others accountable, while also helping the folks who may need treatment, may need some form of mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment. What really comes back down to my ties to the local community, my relationships with our local courts, local service providers, nonprofits, the folks I've been working with, not just the last 10 years as a defense attorney, as a city prosecutor, but also for the last 25, 30 years as a citizen here since I was a teenager volunteering for the Parks and Rec Board. And so I have a long, deep commitment to this community. I'm not going anywhere. Our family's not moving anywhere. I don't want to go to any other office than this one. There's no, my Republican opponent likes to talk about politics and it's apolitical. This is a completely apolitical position for me. My only reason for running was to make sure this community is safer. And I've got 10 years of experience in this courthouse with these judges, with the prosecutors in the office now, with the law enforcement community who I've worked with, both as a defense attorney and as a prosecutor, with Bert Nash, CASA, DECA, Arts Helping the Homeless Outreach, you name the group, I've worked with and spoken with them. My clients need their help. I know where a lot of the problems are right now in this community, and know that it's going to take a lot more than a district attorney to fix those. It's going to take a lot of work between organizations, between government and our community leaders to fix these problems that are leading folks into the criminal justice system. So I think you start with my commitments to community, my ties to the community, and my experience in this courtroom, in this courthouse. You could say that the district attorney must have a certain level of prosecutorial experience. I think what we need is someone with Douglas County experience, with recent experience, someone who's been in the courtroom in the last 10 years, someone who's tried jury trials in the last 10 years. And so that's what I bring to this position is local experience, commitment to this community, and community ties that I think that we all need to focus on to make sure our community stays safe going forward, not just the next 4 years, but 8 and 12 into the future, because as I said, this is not a small hole we're digging out of. This is going to take a lot of work, and it's not something that someone who's never hasn't stepped foot in Douglas County for 9 or 10 years can jump into tomorrow. They don't have to take time to build all the relationships they need to get this office back to the place it should be. So we need someone who can hit the ground running at day one, who knows everyone who's involved in these problems and can help fix those problems. And I'm the only person up here who has local experience, who's been in the courtrooms in Douglas County over the last 10 years, and has had tried jury trials in Douglas County over the last 10 years. So that's why I'd be asking that folks vote for me, is based upon that experience and those ties to the community.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to have Kelly start collecting the cards, and I'll start with the ones that I've already got up here.
Everybody will pass the cards.
Yeah, pass the middle.
And I'll come up to down the center aisle.
Okay, so I'm going to start here. Okay, we ready? Sure. Ready, Mike? Yeah? Okay. So there's an impression that abuse of women and children in Douglas County results in probation. Will you change this if elected, and how? So Mike, why don't we start with you?
Well, those are obviously serious questions, or serious crimes, and no one is in favor of the type of offenses that you described. They are also, I know, extremely difficult cases sometimes to investigate and sometimes to actually prosecute. That's why experience is necessary. And I might say this with respect to that question, if I could just go off just a little bit. I've lived in Douglas County for 35 years. I still have relationships with law enforcement, attorneys, the defense attorneys that practice here. I know a lot of them. I practiced with them in Kansas City, in Topeka, and here in Lawrence. In terms of, have I not been around? Have I been like vacant for the last 10 years? Well, maybe in some ways, but I know Judge McCorney, for example. We've known each other since 2008. Jim McCavery is the chief judge in Douglas County. He lived in Eudora where I lived in Eudora. I've known him for 15 years. I bought a used truck from him a long time ago. Mark Simpson is a judge. We've had cases together when he was a prosecutor. Stacy Donovan, I would probably call her Judge Donovan, not Stacy, if I was in her court. I had cases with her in Topeka. Carl Folsom was an assistant federal public defender in Topeka, who I worked with, and they're an excellent judge. My wife is a retired lawyer, smart enough not to be involved in criminal law. She speaks very fondly of Judge Klepper. Chief Lockhart, the Kansas City, Missouri, the LBD police chief. I knew him when he was in the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department, and I was assigned to the joint KCMO Federal Career Criminal Task Force. Chief Nelson Mosley of KU, I knew him in the Wichita Police Department when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Kansas. Wes Lovett, the Eudora Police Chief, I worked with him when he was in the Prairie Village Police Department, and I was in Johnson County. Mike Patrick, I've known. He happens to be the best friend of my best professional friend. Hannah Cessna, the bids coordinator, is my behind the fence neighbor. If you want a scouting report on me, Lane Cardarella, the chief public defender in the Western District of Missouri, can tell you that. My My dearest friend professionally and also personally is Melody Brannon, the Chief Federal Public Defender of Kansas. Those cases are cases I would take very seriously and want to have an experienced sex crime on hand to deal with them. It takes an art to deal with kids, and it takes an art to know how to prove those cases. And they're very serious. They involve a great deal of victim communication, which I don't think has happened in cases in the past 4 years. And yes, how could I not say I would do everything possible to make sure those cases are effectively and fully investigated and prosecuted? Of course I would. And I would do everything I could to make sure that happens.
Okay, Dakota?
When I was in Shawnee County, the attorney's office there, one of my main responsibilities was to review and charge domestic battery, domestic violence cases. So the very cases I think that we're discussing here, crimes against almost always women, oftentimes involving children. And very early on, I learned that those cases require a great amount of work up front, a great amount of sensitivity to the survivors of those cases. And just as Mr. Warner just said here, they are oftentimes difficult cases that require a lot of time and effort, but they're the type of cases that deserve that time and effort. And they're the type of cases that the district attorney's office should be putting their time and resources into. When the district attorney's office is spending its time fighting with the press, fighting with the court systems, and overcharging cases, charging cases that it has no business taking on, it diverts resources from those various types of cases which need to be worked with law enforcement. They need to be worked with training with law enforcement beforehand. When I was in the Shawnee County DA's office, I personally went to the Topeka Police Department, Shawnee County Sheriff's Office, did trainings for their officers, best practices on how to investigate domestic violence cases, did trainings with them, learned how to write affidavits regarding those cases. And so I take those cases very seriously. I think of them oftentimes as homicide prevention cases where there's an escalation of violence that if those cases aren't dealt with appropriately to begin with, you see an escalation until unfortunately you come up with the worst case scenario. And so just as Mr. Warner said, there'll be a high level of focus on those cases, resources, and we need to have prosecutors who are trained appropriately, who have specific training in how to handle survivors of domestic violence, how to best deal with those victims and those survivors up front. We also need to have a trained and fully staffed victim witness unit that can work with those folks through the process from day one through a plea or trial, and so that you are making sure that they're being listened to, their voice is being heard every step of the process. And so if you, as a district attorney's office, put those procedures in place, if you put the resources in place to handle these cases appropriately, I think you'll see a vast difference in how those cases, the results of those cases at the end of those. But that requires a focus and emphasis on those cases up front, which far too often is not happening as today, and needs to be changed immediately upon coming to the office.
Okay. All right, Dakota, I'm going to have you start with this. We could argue this is a yes/no. Okay. If elected, will you prosecute misdemeanor marijuana possession?
No.
Mike, look at that. Look at that done. Okay. So you both have mentioned that fixing the DA's office, and Mike will go with you first here, won't be easy and it will take time. How long do you plan to stay in this role if elected?
Well, I disagree that it may be a long-term project. I think when you're talking about public safety and taxpayer money, you have to, and you're an elected official, you've got to show results quickly. And you've got to turn things around quickly. And 6 months, but there has to be a pretty concerted effort to initiate change there immediately and turn things around. Because, we're not talking about, an insignificant, if there is such a thing, public office. We're talking about a very important law enforcement office. And this is a law enforcement job. Unfortunately, it's a political job and you have to get elected. But it's a law enforcement job. We're not running for mayor, we're not running for the city commission. It's a law enforcement job, and ordinarily you choose law enforcement officials, by the way, that have prior experience. But be that as it may, there has to be change. And how would I do it? If I were elected in November, I don't know how open the incumbent's office would be, but I would hope the incumbent would open up her office and let me know what kind of cases are in the chute, so to speak. So that when somebody takes office in January, you don't have a jury trial on an important murder case in a week and no one there to do anything about it. I would hope that happens, that there is transitional support. I would immediately talk with all law enforcement. I would talk with all the judges. I would try to talk to all of the existing personnel, the ADAs that are there, and see if they want to stay and if they're going to be comfortable with the type of office I intend to have. If I have the opportunity to hire ADAs, prosecutors, I will work on that immediately. But I will start working right away to try to initiate change there for the better as soon as possible, and to make change happen as soon as possible. I don't want my name in the paper. I'm not in this for drama and accolades. I'm all about function and making that office functional and productive again. And if it takes more than one term, and I'm masochistic enough to run again, I will do it. But I hope to have things running effectively and efficiently in the time that I'm there. And how do I know I can do that? I've done it before. I've supervised attorneys before. I've hired them before. I've done internal audits. I did an internal office of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Wichita in relation to the Wichita Police Department. Okay? I know how to analyze and evaluate offices. And I know how to handle, manage, direct, hire, and fire personnel.
Dakota?
This is one of the benefits and the curses of being in Dallas County for the last 10 years and seeing what's gone on in the district attorney's office over the last 4. I think what Mr. Warner's just described as a fairly normal transition, and I don't see anything about this office being a normal transition. I work in the courthouse every single day. I work with every single ADA in the office, talk with them regularly, talk with the judges regularly. I don't know half the problems that are going on there. And until you get your hands on what's actually going on in that office, actually see what's been transpiring, I don't think there's any way for me or for anyone else to say, I can come in and fix this and turn it around right away. This is not an insignificant office. This is a very big office. With the district attorney, you're talking 16 attorneys, support staff, nearly 45 folks in that office. Personnel alone is a huge issue right now. Setting aside all the other issues that office has to deal with. So, like my opponent, I think, people have been talking with me since I announced April about ways to fix this office and come to me and try to make sure we can work together through a transition should I get elected. I'm sure people have spoken with Mr. Warner about what they can do if elected to help move this office in the right direction. That being said, there are so many moving parts here that this is not, again, I just can't fathom, based upon my personal experience, this is going to be a matter of simply walking in, putting some systems in place, and all of a sudden, things are back on course. This is going to take years, I think, to staff up appropriately, to train appropriately, to restore relationships. There's so many different community partners that the DA's office deals with that need to be brought into the fold to have community solutions, that it's not something that can be done overnight or in a month or 6 months. So it's the second turn of Titanic and avoiding an iceberg. Unfortunately, that iceberg may have already been hit. But at this point, the way I see it, there must be a concerted effort, long-term effort, to make sure that every day that office is getting better. Incrementally, there needs to be a work done before you get into the office as the transition there. Hopefully, I will say this, I may not have said too many wonderful things about the current DA. Having spoken with staff, I do strongly believe that they're trying the best they can to make sure cases are being handled appropriately for a transition. In terms of staffed appropriately for trials, but there are, the biggest concern I think either of us have is walking in day one and 2 days later there's a first-degree murder trial sitting there with no one prosecuted. I don't doubt that the office's commitment to make sure that does not happen. That being said, until you get in there, you just don't know. And so I stress again and again, from what I've seen and the work that needs to be done there, this is a long-term rebuild, and it takes someone who's going to be here for the long term. We both, I think, have been in agreement. We do not, this is not a political issue for us. I don't think Mike wants to go to some other office after this one. Not looking forward for a launchable career. I'm certainly not either. What I want to do is come in, rebuild the relationships that are the backbone of this office, recruit, retain, and train quality prosecutors to handle cases like violent cases against women and children, and make sure that this office day by day gets back to where it was, where the community could trust that it was being protected and that people would be held accountable should they harm others.
All right, I got a couple about this next topic, and because of time, we might make this the last one so that everyone has time to ask direct questions. I know some of you have some very specific questions, which I encourage you to ask the candidates directly.
The library closes at 8.
Right, so that's why we'll do this as our
Okay.
last one, yeah. In case you didn't hear that announcement earlier, Kmart will be closing at whatever. Okay, so several people have asked if you could both state very specifically what your experiences have been in the last 10 years, both in terms of prosecuting and being involved in jury trials. So Mike, do you want to go first?
Sure. Overall, I mean, I guess I'm well rested. I have that going for me. There is some issue going on here about, well, what have I been doing the last 10 years? And, I worked, I've been an attorney almost a little over 35 to 38 years, with about 30 of those years in direct prosecution. I also worked here in Douglas County as a defense attorney until, I would say 2017. Thereafter, I worked as a municipal court judge in Topeka. I worked as a traffic court judge in Shawnee County. I worked transitionally in the Shawnee County District Attorney's Office when Mike Kage was replacing Chad Taylor. COVID hit, and I've been comfortably retired for about 24 months. My last 6 jury trials were all first-degree murder cases. One as a defense attorney here in Douglas County. In those 10 years, have I somehow lost it? Do I not know what I know? Of course not. Do I maintain contacts with lawyers and judges and law enforcement, many of them were retired at the age of 52? Yes, I have. Do I still have contacts with law enforcement that I can tap into if I'm the DA? Of course I do. So I haven't been a hermit for 10 years. I haven't been incarcerated for 10 years. Mr. Lewis has gone to the Douglas County DA's office of the Douglas County Courthouse every day as a defense attorney. That's his perspective. He's never prosecuted a felony case. And his perspective is solely from that point of view. He says it's going to take a very long time. I've worked at a lot of different offices, and many of them were dysfunctional, okay? And I've seen them get turned around, and I know how to do that. I can't give you a timeline either, but I do know if I'm a public official and I'm vested with this responsibility in the district attorney's office, I've got to work hard and as fast as I can to make change happen. I'm not going to say, don't expect much from me because it's such a mess. Hang on, you're going to have more of the same for the next 4 to 6 years. That's not going to be me. But if you look at me, you know, I don't think I look ancient. I'm energized, I'm fit, I'm good to go. I have a lot of experience. I moisturize enthusiastically, you know, if that's an issue. So I'm not over the hill, and I'm ready to go. And that experience that I've had in those 30 years back then, it's still alive and well, and I can apply it here. So whatever this silliness is about what I've been doing the last 10 years, if that's somehow a liability, it's not.
Okay, Dakota?
Well, I think, you know, my opponents told you what I've been doing the last 10 years. I've been a defense attorney primarily in Douglas County. I've also been the city prosecutor for Baldwin City. I was the municipal judge in Baldwin City as well for roughly 3 years before I became the city attorney. And then I'm also the city prosecutor, city attorney in a little town in Osage County called Quinnipiac, which is a world different. It's a town of 300, so it's a very different mix than Douglas County or even in Baldwin City. And what I've been doing for the last 10 years is trying cases, representing folks here in Douglas County and across the state. Been going to court as a defense attorney, probably between Douglas County and other jurisdictions, 20-some jury trials, another 2 dozen bench trials, and that's mostly as a defense attorney. Some of those are as a prosecutor in Quinnipiac and Baldwin City, and just day in, day out, being present in the courtroom, doing the work that criminal defense attorneys do, and then doing the work that municipal prosecutors do. And so my experience for the last 10 years roughly has been day in, day out, working in this community, day in, day out, working in this courthouse. And over that time, I'm a 6-year board member of the Humane Society, on the board of the board of the Free State Brewery, so working with our downtown community, keeping them notified about what's going on downtown, talking with DLI about that, making sure that our downtown folks are kept abreast of things that are going on. And so day in, day out, I've been working in this community, day in, day out, I've been in court trying cases and just doing the work that criminal defense attorneys and prosecutors do.
All right, I think that's enough time for all of our questions, so I encourage all of you to talk to them directly, and they both have campaign tables at the back if you'd like to give your time or your funds. I'm sure they would appreciate it, and thank you so much for joining us.
Because I've got some books. Rather than just sitting and seeing